One of the great victories of the civil rights movement was signed into law in 1965. The Voting Rights Act protected black and other minority voters against the campaigns designed to suppress their vote and weaken their voice in government. Since its inception, the act has come under attack from conservative lawmakers looking to weaken and repeal sections of the legislation. Over the years, they've been successful at chipping away parts of the law. Now, the conservative majority Supreme Court could strip away some of the fundamental protections of the Act and reverse one of the major gains of the civil rights movement. Welcome to the Politics of New America. On the show today, we look at how the Supreme Court could invalidate a huge section of the Voters' Rights Act, weaken voting rights for Americans, and protections against election abuse. I'm your host, Nathan Stone, and with me today is producer Josh Carmody.
Yeah, coming for the civil rights movement. Big swing.
Big swing. You know what, though? This has been the one that launched really the modern conservative movement. The Civil Rights Act galvanized American conservatives in a way that I don't think any other force has ever done so. And a lot of what we're seeing today in this kind of conservative dominant era, those wheels started turning in 64, 65 as backlash to this. So it's not surprising, but it's unfortunate. And we've finally reached a place in American politics where these fundamental rights and freedoms that were so hard won are no longer protected by any of the branches of the federal government.
Yeah, especially not if Donald Trump can just say, hey, Rosie O'Donnell's not a citizen anymore. Pretty wild take to have as in terms of your interpretation of the Constitution.
Absolutely. I mean, if we're ever going to know for sure that the United States of America has fallen, it will be when Trump's posts on Truth Social become law. And God help us when that happens, because nobody's safe. Nobody's safe. Not Rosie O'Donnell, not anybody. Not Canada, Mexico, Europe with our new tariffs. Those are back in town. Good to see that again. And
of
course,
gonna have new tariffs, new numbers.
We're gonna have to question Barack Obama over this Epstein list that he made up. So.
Yeah, I mean, he wrote it like 25 years or 15 years ago.
Yeah,
my God,
that guy was playing 4D chess. Let me tell you, what a villain. Yeah, it's been a week in American politics, and I know I say that every time, but every time I'm not lying. And every week it's totally different too. It's oh boy. Yeah. But Josh, I really looked for something a little bit more cheerful for us this week. And then when I failed, I was like, okay, well, let's talk about the disintegration of the Civil Rights Act and all
which
of
is
the
bringing us
protections
back
around
to
it.
the Supreme Court again.
It is
our old friends.
Our old
Supreme
friends. Yeah.
Court.
If it's not, if it's not the Trump administration, if it's not the man himself, it's usually the Supreme Court. And hey, we're back again. And this one has to do a lot with Clarence Thomas. Are you familiar with his career?
I'm familiar with the late stage corruption.
Okay, yeah.
I'm familiar with just the amount of bribes and gifts he's accepted, like RVs and vacations and ridiculous stuff, things that should not be overlooked but instead are. So yeah, I'm very familiar with that version of him. I don't know, he's been on the Supreme Court for a long time. I don't know anything about like him early on or anything he would have been around for that is significant.
Yeah,
all I know is the kind of getting RVs and vacations.
Well, he has been consistent in one regard, and that is he's never much liked the Voters' Rights Act. And all the way back in 1994, so when you and I were little kids, and I remember 1994 was a pretty good time, as I remember it. And all the way back in 1994, he was...
Yeah, Jim Carrey had 3 #1 movies at the box office that year.
Oh,
what
wow.
a great year. Yeah.
Okay. The Mask, Ace Ventura...
Dumb and Dumber.
Dumb and Dumber.
Yeah.
All right.
And Dumb and Dumber was the first movie I ever saw in theaters.
Is that true?
I was 4 years old, and I went.
Well,
and I don't know.
Movie.
I don't know if I don't know if my parents were there. I might have been with my cousins and like my aunt and uncle. I just remember that when he has the dream sequence where he rips the chef's heart out, I left the theater like white as a ghost and just like shivering, like, oh my god, I just saw that happen, and like wandered out into the movie theater, and they just sent my older cousin to go get me, who was 6. So my 6-year-old cousin came up to find me. None of the adults. They had to make sure they kept up with the plot of Dumb and Dumber. But yeah, I was brought back, and I remember them getting to Aspen, and I had a great time.
Okay. Wow. I feel like we've just heard kind of like a seminal moment in how Josh's psyche coalesced here.
Oh, I would say so. There's definitely several therapists, I'm sure, that would agree.
Well, as much as I would love to just talk about those 3 Jim Carrey movies for the rest of this episode, I should probably get back onto Clarence Thomas. In 1994, he kind of authored some opinions, some takedown pieces about the Voters' Rights Act, and for a long time he's had a real axe to grind with sections of this act. And now he's been on the Supreme Court since 1991, because apparently no one thought that there should be any kind of limit on how long Supreme Court justices can serve.
People used to live to be like 58.
Yeah, it wasn't really a problem.
They're like,
for the founders.
Fine.
Yeah. Yeah, you get a bad judge in there. He's got half a decade tops.
Yeah,
but
he's got an uncooked piece of pork waiting for him.
That's right.
Take his ass out.
So we're gonna talk about Clarence Thomas a bit on this show, but for anyone who isn't up on the Voting Rights Act, and again, this came in 1965, and so it's not a piece of law that a lot of people are going to be super familiar with, but it is a really important one. And it was an act to enforce the 15th Amendment of the Constitution. And so the 15th Amendment is all around how people can vote, specifically newly freed at the time Black people, and how they could vote, and kind of about getting them into society and giving them these rights that were up until that point only for white Americans. So this is an interesting act because it kind of takes what was already on the books in the Constitution and further explains how these rights are to be protected and how they should be enshrined in kind of American political life. Now, before this point, Black people in America did have the vote. However, there was so many ways that jurisdictions, mainly in the South, used to keep Black people from exercising their rights. And you'd have things like poll taxes, where you would have to pay a fee to vote. You would have literacy tests, which were among the more racist of the policies, which was you had to basically write either on a blackboard or on a piece of paper. You had to prove that you were literate to the voting office. So there was a lot of, and of course there was times too where you had folks like the Klan who would try and scare people away from voting as well. So there was a lot of really heinous things done. And so the Voting Rights Act was created to make sure that none of that was happening anymore. Now, there were a lot of really kind of specific things that they did to limit the power of the states to harass people. And so, for example, jurisdictions had to obtain what was called pre-clearance, either from a district court or from the U.S. Attorney General, for any new voting practices and procedures. And that really kind of put a dampening on how racist a lot of states could be when it came to voting measures. However, that particular one, the pre-clearance, was overturned back in about 2013. It was challenged and gotten rid of. And this is the Voting Rights Act has been attacked many times over the years. So one of the biggest things, though, is it is a really good way to challenge gerrymandering. Gerrymandering is where you draw up districts, the congressional, when districts are drawn up in such a way that they either dilute or in some way negatively impact one group of voters over another.
It's kind of like when you'd split a chocolate bar with your friend that you both paid for, and it's like, okay, whoever splits it, the other person gets to like choose the half. Instead, it's the person who splits it also gets to choose their half, and they like carve it up like a jigsaw puzzle.
That is a really good way to put it. Yeah. It is a wild thing, honestly, that in the United States, not only do the states have their own methods of drawing up their congressional boundaries, but it's usually the party in power that is able to do that. So
nothing to see here, folks.
Nothing to see here, folks. In most other liberal democracies, usually there's an independent agency. So where we are in Canada, Elections Canada is the government agency that is nonpartisan, that creates ridings for which are basically the same as districts, and then parties get to choose, who their candidate is, but that's it, right? Like those ridings are created by a totally independent body that does not care. They're just interested in basic numbers and math to assign seats, and for the most part, that is how it is done in other democracies. The American system is very different in this case, and because of that, it can actually lead to some very, very unfair outcomes in terms of how seats are created and how they are apportioned throughout the state. Now, what's so important about this right now, right? Why are we talking about this today? Well, a couple of court cases are on their way to the Supreme Court, likely, that will basically force the court to rule on this particular issue. And what they're talking about is Section 2 of the Voting Rights Act. And Section 2 bans racially discriminatory voting practices. And why would that get thrown out? Well, it wouldn't get thrown out of the act or anything like that. But what the Supreme Court could do is basically kill enforcement of that part of the act, which would effectively remove it.
So kind of just like, it's there, but, whatever.
Yeah.
Like kind of just like treat it as a whatever, and people don't do anything about it. I mean, I'm fairly certain it's still here in Halifax, where we record, illegal to smoke on the sidewalk, because they passed a law and they built a whole bunch of like specific smoking stations, and no one gave a shit. And I'm pretty sure they just ignored it, and it is still on the books, and you could still technically get like kind of sidelined with it, but they don't enforce it regularly.
That's exactly it. That is the long and short of it. If it's not enforced, laws are just pieces of paper. And I think that's been a theme on this show so far.
Contracts are just words.
Yeah, words on a page. So right now, the American Civil Liberties Union of Arkansas uh, is suing the or has issued a lawsuit challenging the Arkansas state House of congressional map for violating Section 2 of the Voting Rights Act. And basically they claim that the Arkansas Board of Apportionment in 2021 drew up a map that undermined the voting strength of black Arkansans.
Arkansasans?
I
don't know. I mean, that's
people
a cool one.
From
That
Arkansas
just came
who
out
are
of
black.
nowhere.
Yeah, I like that. They probably like that one.
Yeah, now there's a football team. that's a sports ball team you can set your watch to.
So this has been kind of winding its way through the courts, and
Arkansans. That's what.
Arkansans. That'd be it. Yeah. So this has been winding their way through the courts, but the Eighth Circuit Court, which is the circuit court that Arkansas falls under, did something that was kind of unprecedented when they heard the case. They threw it out and claimed that actually under Section 2, this part of the Voting Rights Act, only the federal government can bring these cases to court, which goes against every ruling for the past 70 years, 1965 to 2025, 60 years? For over half a century.
I'm bad at math.
Yeah. So
oh, God. You really put me on the spot there. I'm sweating bullets. Don't make me
50
math.
years. Okay. So for the last half century, private individuals and organizations have been able to bring these cases. And in fact, more than 400 Section 2 cases have been litigated in federal court. So when the Eighth Circuit Court did this, they were kind of throwing out every bit of precedent to this point. And perhaps the aim of that was to get this case to the Supreme Court.
Yeah.
So the crux of what's happening, and I know this is a little bit more in the weeds than we sometimes get, but the crux of what's happening is that this particular case, if it goes to the Supreme Court, if the conservative majority upholds this new precedent from the Eighth Circuit Court, it would stop private individuals and groups like the ACLU, like the NAACP, from litigating on behalf of people who are being suppressed, their voting rights being suppressed.
Yeah, they're two major organizations that are champions of the disenfranchised.
Yeah, exactly. And so if this happens, the only recourse that you would have if you were a group of citizens who were felt that your state was illegally, they were gerrymandering, they were trying to break up or split your votes, or in some way kind of keep you from or lessen your voting power, you would have to convince the Department of Justice to take up that case. And I mean, look, we all know the Department of Justice and the state of the Department of Justice right now.
Pamela? You want me to get Pamela on the line?
Yeah,
we can get Pamela on the line. No, let's give Pamela a call. No, I think, you know what? I've known Pamela a long time. No, I think
we're good. We're fine.
We can work this one out. No,
Yeah.
let's get old Bondi on the phone.
So, just as the Department of Justice in its time since 1965, since the Voting Rights Act here, have only brought about 20 cases to court.
Okay.
Whereas private citizens and these advocacy groups have brought somewhere around 380, 400 of these cases. So, the DOJ doesn't always care, and it certainly wouldn't under this administration. And so we go back here to our buddy Clarence Thomas, who has long had an axe to grind with this, and he follows a train of thought about this specific type of law called originalism.
Okay.
And
that's first I've heard of this.
Yeah.
I've heard that word before.
Yeah, it's the belief that the courts, and it's specifically the Supreme Court in this case, should only enforce rights explicitly spelled out in statutes or the Constitution.
Okay.
So basically, he wants ironclad in writing in the Constitution before he thinks that they should enforce these laws. Okay. Whereas the Voting Rights Act is again kind of an add-on to that side of the Constitution. It was the thing that said, hey, these rules in the Constitution, you have to follow these, and here's how you have to follow these. So the other kind of argument that a lot of conservatives in the courts and conservative lawmakers have made that kind of goes hand in hand with Thomas's stance is that actually this Voting Rights Act was only relevant in the 60s. And now we live in a utopia where there are no problems. And so why do we need this? We don't. We should just, we'll put it in the history books. We look it up. We can all chuckle about how bad the past was. But now that we live in the future, we don't need this anymore. And if both of those sound like terrible arguments, I mean, yeah, I feel like they kind of are. I don't really have any.
It feels like it's most of the arguments for kind of deregulation and such things where it's like, oh, well, no, it's in their best interest to not poison the planet. Then they won't do it. And I'm like, well, what were they doing in the 60s? Why do you think we have all these regulations? Someone screwed up down the line.
Yeah.
Like, come on.
Yeah. I mean, clearly, the 60s when everything was just bathed in DDT. That was a fluke. That was a one-off.
Oh, yeah.
We shouldn't.
See, you got to go back to the 50s when things were great, when you could be playing out on the street and then all of a sudden a truck would come by and just spray all of everything down with the toxins to make sure the grass grew.
As I've said, there's been a broad conservative effort to narrow and weaken the Voting Rights Act. Yeah. And in 2013, there was a decision, it was called the Shelby County decision, that got rid of the pre-clearance rule from the Voting Rights Act. The pre-clearance rule was very important as well, and that was the one that kept states in check by saying, if you make up new rules about how people vote, you have to get them cleared by the federal government.
Okay.
States' rights rearing its head again, as it always does. Kind of killed that. And now we're kind of seeing the further push. In 2023, actually, there was a case called Allen v. Milligan, where by a 5-4 majority, including two of the other conservative Supreme Court justices, the Chief Justice Roberts and Kavanaugh, they upheld Section 2's protections. It's not clear that will happen this time around.
Like, are they voting on the same thing, or do you mean just kind of voting?
So there was kind of a
stuff?
similar. They upheld it in a different case.
Okay,
is all that is. So this time it's coming in kind of with a new tactic, right? Where the circuit court said, oh, these rights exist, but you can't litigate them, right? It said that to the ACLU.
Okay.
So even though even though conservatives kind of lost in 2023, this new case kind of attacks it from a different angle. So if this happens, what you'll see is likely worse gerrymandering than we already have. And I know we kind of talked about what gerrymandering is in a very kind of basic way. And I do love had a very good analogy for us.
Thank you. Yeah, I hope everyone's really upset.
But just for anyone who's still kind of like, okay, but how does this actually work? So gerrymandering is all around the legislative and congressional districts and how they're shaped. And it's something that happens kind of every 10 years. States redraw their legislative and congressional district lines, and it follows the census. And because communities change and shift and populations rise and fall in areas, redistricting is actually a very important thing to do to ensure some level of fairness, because you're not getting fairness in the Senate. That's an absolute garbage fire of an organization. 2 senators per state, regardless of population, is a travesty. But at least in Congress, there is some representation by population. And that is all down to redistricting. Now, John Adams...
friend of the pod, somebody that we brought up who is potentially boring. Did talk about him before. Maybe said he was boring. Hey, look, not pointing fingers.
So he was an advocate of this whole system of redistricting, and he called it creating an exact portrait, a miniature of the people as a whole. Which again, the founders had very artistic ways of describing this thing that they were creating. It was kind of like Frankenstein before he brings the monster to life and he sees it as this beautiful creation, and then he flips the switch, it sits up, and he's just like, oh no, what have I done? American democracy
he's real poetic about it until it interrupts his marriage with his cousin.
So yeah, gerrymandering comes into it when bad actors, basically, politicians, the staff, the people who are in charge of this, and those people are generally the people who are in power at the time, so either Republicans or Democrats, and they decide to kind of put their thumb on the scale and draw maps in such a way where it benefits them. Now, there's 2 ways to gerrymander, generally. They're called cracking and packing. Yeah, I know. You're looking at me like...
Oh, wow. Such fun terms. I can't wait to learn about this.
Yeah. So they're quite descriptive. Cracking splits groups of people with similar characteristics, say skin color, and such, and usually it's people who have the same party affiliation across multiple districts. So, for example, if you have a nice big 4-block radius of a city, it's got a ton of people in it, and all of those people, or most of them anyway, are Democratic voters, and they just happen to be either black or minority. And then you have these lovely, on either sides of this kind of these 4 blocks, you have suburbs, and then you have rural counties, and those are white as a sheet. So
white as a sheet that you might cut some holes in, allegedly.
Go out dressed as a ghost for Halloween.
Yeah.
Yeah. A
ghost, a wizard, a dragon of various types. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. You'll have a grand time. What you might do if you were a Republican who is drawing up these district boundaries is cut those 4 blocks into 4 and stick them onto those other districts.
Yeah.
And in that way, you dilute the power of all of those voters by grouping them with a white majority that you know is your base. And that is a very effective tactic. And that's been a tactic that's kind of like the original gerrymandering, right? Is doing that because it was a way to preserve white power, especially in the South, where you had large populations of newly freed, newly voting, well, at the time it would have been black men, but then eventually black women as well. And so you see a lot of efforts around kind of cracking these urban districts and kind of lumping them in with suburban and rural areas where you know you're going to be deep red.
Yeah, and I do implore people to go and look at some of these gerrymandered districts, things that you can see that are active now. It's like AI's interpretation of a roadmap of Prince Edward Island. It is some wild stuff, like in terms of like how far reaching they go, how ridiculous the shapes are. And you think about like what your neighborhood is like, or if I'm just to speak about where I live, like I think of kind of slices, like streets up from me, streets around. There's a neighborhood that kind of works to just draw arbitrarily through that, like an abstract shape. What does everybody in that area have in common? And that's, kind of what we're talking about here today.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And you can actually see how badly your state is gerrymandered or how well it does. There's a great resource by the folks at Princeton University. It's called the Gerrymandering Project, and it tracks every congressional district in the United States. And you can get a report card on your state as a whole. You can zoom in. You can see the weird little squiggly shapes that they come in. And not every gerrymandered district is kind of that spaghetti type of shape. A lot of them are nice squares, but they're clever squares. They're squares that have been well thought out. So just because you don't see, if your district is a lovely square, doesn't mean that it isn't affected by this and that you haven't been affected by this. So yeah, please do search that out. It's a fun way to kill some time. And
fun is subjective around here, just so we're all aware.
Yeah. You can also see where the worst offenders are. And surprise, surprise, it's the old Confederacy. It's pretty red down there. The map goes from green to yellow to red to tell you how bad states are. And the South has one passing grade. And that is Alabama, surprisingly. They got a C for the House of Congress and a B for the Senate. So
I mean, that might just be that Alabama was so bad at everything that they couldn't figure out how to screw things up.
I mean,
allegedly.
So yeah, let's go now to packing. So packing is the opposite of cracking. And this is where you cram certain groups of voters into as few districts as possible. Now, this is kind of a more modern take on gerrymandering because of demographic changes. Basically, America is a lot less white than it used to be, and it continues to trend in that direction for now. And so, if you're a Republican, say in Louisiana, and we're going to talk about Louisiana in a little bit because they're the second case that might kind of break the camel's back here.
I love the bayou.
Yeah. So about 30% of eligible voters in Louisiana are black.
Mm-hmm.
And for a long time, they were underrepresented because of being cracked. The gerrymandering split and diluted their power. However, once a population reaches a certain point, it's hard to crack those populations up, because what you might end up doing is diluting your own base, right? You might, if you're, say you're only 55% to 45%, right? So 55% Republican to 45% Democrat.
Yeah.
If you, depending on how you split those things, you could actually end up losing seats, because you've gerrymandered and you've kind of weakened some of your own ridings by shoving some more Democrats in there. And you don't want to do that. What you want to do instead, if it's a little closer, so in a state with a large minority population, or just a very close vote, you want to pack those people in as few districts as possible, because then, sure, the Democrat wins the district by 70% of the vote or 80% of the vote. You've won 4 other districts because you were able to stick all the Democratic voters in that 1 or 2 spots. And so this is a more modern one we've seen as demographics have shifted in the United States. So what is the actual impact of gerrymandering? Because as I said before, both parties do it. So doesn't it even out? It does not. Like everything in politics, Republicans are a lot better at this than Democrats are, especially when it comes to doing things that are either skirting the rules or of bad intent. Republicans are just so much better at this.
I mean, when you don't have shame, it's really easy to be a shit weasel. So, yeah.
So, nationally, gerrymandering and kind of partisan bias in congressional maps gives Republicans a net 16 to 17 seat advantage. And this is not just the last election. This is like most of the last 10 years. Yeah. So Michigan, North Carolina, and Pennsylvania are the 3 states with the worst gerrymanders in the last redistricting cycle. Accounted for an extra 7 to 10 Republican seats in in Congress. And that doesn't sound like a lot. It is the difference, however, between a Republican and or a Democratic majority in Congress. Like, that is your whole difference. Right now, it's, a razor thin Republican majority. Mm-hmm. Without these gerrymandered seats, that majority does not exist. It's a Democratic majority.
Yeah.
And this is why this whole thing with the Supreme Court is so important, because their ability to cut up congressional districts in a way that is going to affect the power of and lessen the power of minority voters and black voters is going to keep them in power. And it is a way to undermine democracy without fully casting it off, right? It's a way to legitimize yourself while making it so hard for people to have their say on election day. So, as an example, 2018, Democrats in Wisconsin won every statewide office plus a majority of the statewide vote. But because Wisconsin is gerrymandered, they won only 36 of the 99 seats in the state assembly. So this is obviously state elections, not federal, but it goes to show the absolute incredible advantage that comes with interfering in how districts are drawn. It's not a minor problem. It is a huge problem. And if the Supreme Court sides with Arkansas, if they side with the Eighth Circuit courts, there is basically no recourse to fix this.
And that makes sense. We've seen a continuing diminishment, if that's a word, a continued diminishing of checks and balances, I guess is what I will say, to correct some of my poor grammar. But the checks and balances keep disappearing.
Mm-hmm.
And there is, I don't know, sort of a disingenuous recency bias from people that are like, oh, well, why do we have this check or balance or any of these safeguards? We don't do that. And it's like, well, we don't do it because we have it, and it was made a law before you were born, and so you've never experienced a world where that doesn't happen.
Yeah.
And guess what? It's going to now. So
yeah. Yeah, there's unfortunately so much of this stuff gets buried in the barrage of nonsense that we have to sort through every day. Mm-hmm. That this received media coverage, like this is ongoing, but like I'm getting, I'm following the Supreme a journalistic blog on the Supreme Court. How many people are doing that? No one's doing that. I'm the only weirdo that's doing that. Like me and a few like interns in Washington probably.
People are looking at the tariffs. People are looking at what's happening with the non-existent but also possibly existent Epstein list that was written by Obama. Like there is so much at the top of the news scale.
Mm-hmm.
It's... What are people supposed to do?
Yeah, and there
can they do? I should
much, and there's going to be even less if the court rules on this. So that hasn't been taken up by the Supreme Court yet, but there is another case that's also going to have a chance of affecting the Voting Rights Act and everything around it. Yeah, so Louisiana. They are being sued. They've actually got an interesting thing going on here. So the state of Louisiana is being sued for violating Section 2. And they actually, this is something that went to court from 2022. Now, like I said, a third of the population in Louisiana is black. But the state's legislature in 2022 adopted a congressional map that included only one majority black district out of the 6 allotted to the state. So again, that is cracking. That is they had to give them one, but then all the rest of the black vote is diluted. So that went to federal court, where the federal court said, yeah, no, you can't do that. So they went back and they had to make a second black majority district, which, again, not a perfect solution, but you know what? Now that's 2 out of 6, which is a third, and that's about the population, right? So at least in this case, you are, if you're in one of these black majority districts and you are black, you can have the feeling that at least like, okay, 30% of the population, 30% of the districts. It's not perfect, but it's not terrible. After that, another group came in and filed a lawsuit about this second district. They described themselves as non-African American. I'll let your imagination guide you on how much or how little melanin they may have in their skin. But they were contended that the map was an unconstitutional racial gerrymander, which is a clever thing to do because they can argue that it's kind of like the packing, but it's a no-win scenario, right? For if for Black Louisianans, because if this gets overturned, they're back down to having less representation than they did when that second district was created. So the whole thing is going to the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court they've pushed it to the fall, to their next session, which made Clarence Thomas angry enough that he wrote a dissension on the opinion, saying that the court has an obligation to resolve such challenges promptly, and he sees no reason to avoid deciding these cases now. The reason why this one is important is because it gets Section 2 back on the court's docket, right? It's another attack from another angle. Because if they rule that this is, in fact, unconstitutional, then they've struck a blow against creating districts to represent minority voters, right? So at that point, even if you were to take a state to court for gerrymandering and get a decision, what would they be able to do? Because this would set a precedent where they can't create those kind of protected districts that represent minorities.
Yeah.
So there's multiple avenues at which the Voting Rights Act is under attack here. And just to add a awful cherry on top of this, the Department of Justice, who soon may be the only ones who can bring Section 2 lawsuits, have announced that they are ending long-running bipartisan enforcement of Section 2. So they're not interested. What they want to pivot towards is the chasing those claims of voter fraud from 2020, and just other kind of Trump administration election bugaboos. So those moves are going to already significantly hamper enforcement of the Voting Rights Act, and protections are just not going to be there. So this is one where it's so hard to tell people what they should do, other than to maybe support organizations that are litigating this, that are fighting this because they need to win. If you're looking for positives, and there are few here, it's that the Supreme Court has not ruled on either of these cases yet. And Clarence Thomas has been kind of in a minority opinion before when it comes to throwing out these protections. There's likely him and another, I think Kavanaugh maybe, who are kind of really gung-ho about this, but they still have to convince the other conservative judges. Mm-hmm. And I know that's kind of like faint hope, right? Like you're praying that that a letter from the governor comes before you have to walk the Green Mile. But this is kind of where we're at. Calling your congressperson does not help, but raising awareness at least raises awareness, and awareness is always a good thing, even if you can't directly act on this. But supporting, ACLU, the NAACP, if you care about this issue, it's probably a good one to do. But yeah, that's, I think, where we're going to leave this one tonight.
Oh boy.
Yeah. Yep. Good. We're good. All right. I hope you've enjoyed this episode. Thanks for sticking with us, and we'll see you in the next one. Bye. Thanks for listening. If you enjoy the show, please subscribe, give us a 5-star rating on your podcast platform of choice, and tell all your friends. The Politics of New America is hosted by Nathan Stone and produced by Josh Carmody. You can follow us on Blue Sky at Politics New America.
This has been a Haunted Mouse production. Cut that out.